Hello and welcome to this webinar, Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet for Year 7, 8 and 9. If you haven't done so yet, grab a pen and a piece of paper and let's get started. So there are 3 key learning aims for this session. We want to consider genre, audience and purpose for this assignment. We want to comment on the effects of language and also know how to embed and explain quotations. Now this is for a very specific assignment. How does Shakespeare present Romeo's love for Juliet in this extract of a soliloquy from Act 2, Scene 2? Now, Act 2, Scene 2 is the balcony scene. It's perhaps one of the most famous scenes in theatre, where each lover speaks a monologue or a soliloquy. So I'm sure that you've heard Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? And that is from Act 2, Scene 2 of Romeo and Juliet. So this is the background of the scene. After meeting Juliet at the ball, Romeo creeps into the Capulet garden and sees Juliet on her balcony talking to herself. He overhears he's talking to himself, and he overhears Juliet talking to herself. They confess their mutual love, and Romeo leaves, promising to arrange a secret marriage in the morning. You can see why this is one of the most famous scenes in theatre, because it was love at first sight at the ball. They had a wonderful, flirtatious conversation. They exchanged kisses, and then they were left horrified, realizing that they were the enemy, that he, Romeo, was a Montague, and she, Juliet, was a Capulet. So they'd met the perfect partner, and yet they were enemies. So in Act 2, Scene 2, they've realized that their love can conquer hatred. They decided that they would take the risk of conquering hatred and uniting in marriage, because they had this mutual passion for each other. So that is the background of Act 2, Scene 2. So before Juliet speaks, Romeo speaks his solo speech or soliloquy, and that's what we're looking at today. But first we need to understand that this, as you are aware, spoiler alert, does not have a happy ending. It's not happily ever after. It's not that dream wedding and the fun farewell that we have in Disney movies. This is a tragedy. So that means that Romeo is a tragic hero. It's a bit like Superman. So he is well respected and everyone likes him, but he has this weakness, kryptonite, and it's something that could in fact kill him. So a tragic hero is someone who is very well respected. Romeo, everyone likes him, even his enemy, even Juliet's dad has to concede that people think he's a well brought up and a very kind, sensitive young man. That's his reputation, but he has a weakness. He's impatient. He cannot wait, and he falls head over heels with one woman, Rosaline, who doesn't even know he exists, actually hates him. She's in love with God. She wants nothing to do with men, and he falls head over heels then, but for another woman, Juliet, who actually their relationship is mutual. Now, he perhaps is very proud because he thinks he can get away with a secret marriage. He thinks that he can do things in secret. So this hubris is also his downfall, this excessive pride, and he makes a series of mistakes. The first mistake he makes is marrying in secret. The next mistake that he makes is killing his wife's cousin. It's just mistake after mistake, and his fortune is reversed. He becomes banished, and it's disaster for him because he's separated from Juliet, and he's separated from her when she dies. But obviously, we also have this arch rival, Nemesis, is introduced. To a certain extent, for poor Romeo, who's a tragic hero, the Nemesis could be Paris, but it's also Juliet's father, who forces Juliet into the arms of Paris, and he decides It's all too much, but anagnoresis happens. That means he learns the truth, but too late. And we know much more than he does, that Juliet is not dead and his love is not ended, but it ends in death. And we have this overflow of feelings of pity and fear, and catharsis is at the end of the play. So that is typical tragic hero. Now, how does that fit into this assignment? Well, you can see that it's about his weakness, it's about his arrogance, it's the beginning of him making mistake after mistake after mistake that he doesn't realize until too soon that he's ending up in disaster. So it's a roller coaster structure. His declaration for love is in the rising action before things turn and really dramatically go wrong for him. Now, what is Shakespeare doing? It's not a real character, but through Romeo, Shakespeare explores some really interesting ideas. Attraction. So as teenagers, do people have attraction? Do people fall in love? Is there impulsiveness? Is there risk taking? This perhaps is why it's one of these enduring plays, because people understand this idea of attraction and the power of love at first sight. And we really see it in Act 2, Scene 2, the balcony scene. We also look at fathers. What makes a good father? Romeo's father isn't really around. Juliet's father is very strict. What makes a good father, and therefore what makes a good child? Shakespeare seems to be looking at those issues. Also looking at social order, the impact of hatred and violence. If there wasn't the hatred, if there wasn't the violence between the two families, Shakespeare seems to be saying that this love would have flourished, but with the toxins in the atmosphere and in the ground of their love, the seeds of passion are killed. And then honor, looking at family and the love and loyalty of the family name, and to what extent is that more important than passion and love for your husband or wife? Because that's what Romeo does. He says he'd rather have his love for Juliet than the love for his family, because he doesn't want her to be his enemy. And then Shakespeare, I think, also through Romeo's character, looks at freedom. He is controlled as a young person. There are restrictions, there's laws, there's punishments that he has to come under. And yet Romeo seems to find a way of having freedom despite the control and restrictions. And obviously the fact that he sneaks into the garden, creeps in there and talks to her when she's on the balcony, despite the distance, despite the danger, he manages to undermine the control and restrictions. And also sorrow. We look at hopelessness, we look at sadness. Romeo is a character with intense emotions. Okay, so we're going to look at the extract from the scene, but I want you, as you're writing the answers down, and I'll be giving you some of the answers as well, I want you to really focus on the effects of language. It's not enough just to tell your teacher what it means. You have to explain why Shakespeare has used it. What's he creating? What's he building? So when you use words like show, you're explaining the effects of language. But I know that myself and many other teachers are allergic to that word show. So why not use words like suggest, implies, indicates, conveys, depicts, signifies, illustrates, exemplifies, highlights. And then when it subtly shows something, you can say alludes to, insinuates, intimates. So that's really meaning it infers. So this is the beginning of the scene. His friends are mocking him. He's run away, they think, into the arms of Rosalind, or maybe he's crying somewhere. They're mocking him. And Romeo says this: he jests at scars that never felt a wound. So he's angry with his friends. He jests at scars that never felt a wound. What do you think that the injury metaphors, scars and wound, suggest about Romeo's feelings of love? You can pause this seminar and you can write down what you think this suggests about his feelings of love at the beginning of this scene. Okay, go through some answers. This is what I think it suggests. I think the use of injury metaphors, scars and wound, suggests that Romeo sees love as painful. He suffered for love. However, these injury metaphors, they also imply that Romeo is a brave soldier who, despite the agony of love, is determined to seek Juliet. So he has scars, he has wounds, he's been in the battlefield of love, but he's determined to continue. This is the next part of the soliloquy. Shakespeare is using, and Romeo is using, celestial imagery to describe Juliet as the sun. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. So this is the next question. This is number 2 out of 6. Why is Juliet a sunrise to Romeo? Pause the webinar. Write down your answer. Why is Juliet a sunrise to Romeo? Okay, I would suggest that this is the kind of answer that you could give. The use of celestial imagery in "it is the east and Juliet is the sun" indicates the power of Juliet's presence. As he looks at her, she's like a bright sunrise, bringing hope and joy. This conveys not only a sense of joy, but also a feeling of comfort. So the sunrise, the celestial imagery, the fact that she is like this heavenly being, brings hope and joy and comfort into his life. Let's have a look at the next part of the scene. So Romeo tells Juliet to beat off the competition, kill off all traces of the jealous moon. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is sick, she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. Who could this jealous sun symbolize and personify? Who could the jealous sun symbolize and personify? Pause the webinar. Have a go at answering that question. So this is my answer. The use of personification in "arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon" signifies a change in tone, because the imagery here is more violent than loving. Perhaps the sick and pale moon is depicting Romeo, who has been a slave to Rosalind's love, who didn't return his affection and only brought him grief and sorrow. Maybe the personification also symbolizes Romeo's chance to cast off pain and embrace a kinder love. So perhaps the moon is his old self, the sick, green, envious, jealous self who was in love with Rosaline and had no hope of ever capturing her love. And this is his chance to kill off the old Romeo and to be reborn in the sunrise of Juliet's affections. Okay, we're about halfway through these different activities. Now the next task is the next part of the soliloquy. Romeo is excited because he catches a glimpse of Juliet. She's there on the balcony. And he says, "It is my lady, oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it." So this is the question. How can this paradox of Juliet's face speaking without saying anything be true? How can this paradox of Juliet's face speaking without saying anything be true. Now let's very quickly just explain a paradox. A paradox are two things that seem to be contradictory. They seem to be opposites. They seem to be conflicting, but they actually make sense on closer inspection. So when you say you have to be cruel to be kind, what? Cruel to be kind? It seems as if you're cruel if you're taking chocolate away from a child, but actually you're being kind because they've had too much chocolate. They're going to ruin their teeth, ruin their appetite, ruin their body, ruin their skin. So it seems as if it's cruelty, but you're being kind. It's a paradox. It seems to be contradictory, but on closer inspection, it actually makes sense. So her face speaks, and yet she says nothing. How can this paradox be true? Pause the seminar and answer that question. Okay, well, this would be my answer. The paradox of she speaks, yet she says nothing, alludes to the power of Juliet's beauty. Romeo is compelled by her face and her features. She has influence and control over his feelings of love. She hasn't even said a word. This shows the force of Romeo's attraction. She speaks because her beauty shines. Her beauty compels him. Her beauty influences and controls his feelings of love, but she doesn't say a word. Second to last one. Romeo sees Juliet leaning on the balcony. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I may touch that cheek. What do these exclamatory sentences show that Romeo wants to do? What does he want to do? Pause the webinar, have a go at this question. Okay, this would be my answer. The exclamatory sentence, oh, that I were a glove upon his hands, illustrates Romeo's desire for Juliet. He is evidently not satisfied by admiring her from a distance, and Shakespeare presents his desperate longing to be closer. So you can see I've used the word illustrates and presents. I'm trying to explain why Shakespeare's using this exclamatory sentence. And you can see that all the time the quotations aren't separated out. They're part of the sentence and they're embedded. Okay, let's have a look at the last one. Romeo now is excited to hear Juliet speak. She says something. He's eavesdropping. And he compares her with an angel. She speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night, being o'er my head, as is a winged messenger of heaven upon the white upturned, wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him when he bestrides the lazy pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air. Oh, speak again, bright angel. What kind of angel does Romeo compare Juliet with? The obvious answer is a bright angel, but all of those aspects, particularly the bits that I've underlined, show the kind of angel that he's comparing Juliet with. So you're going to have a go, pause the webinar, use those phrases that are to do with explaining the effect, and write a response that has your quotation embedded. Have a go. Okay, this would be my response. The comparison of Juliet with a bright angel who mortals fall back to gaze as it bestrides the lazy clouds alludes to her majestic and angelic presence. Not only is she above him physically, standing on the balcony, but Shakespeare implies that Romeo is awestruck, mesmerized and hypnotized by her because he's never met anyone like her on earth. So this is a powerful, majestic, superior angel that he's comparing Juliet with. Okay, I hope that has helped you. I hope you understand that you really need to understand that Romeo is a tragic hero. That means that his impulsiveness, his impatience, his pride makes him complete all of these wrong decisions, even though they seem right at the time. I hope you understand that his journey is tragic, but this balcony scene is where things look as if they're going well for the couple. I hope you understand that also through Romeo, Shakespeare looks at issues like freedom, and he looks at violence, and he looks at families. And I also hope you understand that using words like emphasizes, depicts, suggests, implies, really is explaining why Shakespeare is using particular language features. And I hope that you can now, if you want to have a go, taking a bit longer, you can write about all the different aspects of language in this scene. Thank you for joining me, and see you next time.